Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant, where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watched in the WWE Network. As the month of January comes to a close, I approach the end of my Royal Rumble reviews here on the channel. So today I'll be talking all about the 2010 installment of the Royal Rumble, before wrapping it up on Tuesday with my thoughts on the 2011 show. So the 2010 Royal Rumble holds a special place in my heart, as it was the first pay-per-view I ever ordered. I watched it live at my aunt's house. I did not have pay-per-view at the house that I was living in at the time, so I went over to my aunt's house to watch this show. I did not record it, which was stupid of me, so I have not watched the entire show in its entirety since that point in time. Actually, I watched it for the first time in its entirety as a whole, for the first time in 5 years, only a couple of days ago. So it was very fun to watch it back. I brought back a lot of memories. I think it's a very underrated show. I didn't think it was an amazing show. But and there are some parts about it that I can see why people didn't like and why people poop on this pay-per-view. But I did think it was a pretty good show, and I'll get to why it was just a good show in just a second. But kicking off the show is an ECW Championship matchup with Christian defending against Ezekiel Jackson. Now, I think this is one of the more underrated pay-per-views, one of the more underrated matches on the pay-per-view. I think Christian and Ezekiel Jackson, given that Ezekiel Jackson was not the best in-ring worker, and he still isn't. If you watch the guy in Lucha Underground, he is not an amazing worker. Obviously, a guy of his size, he doesn't look like a great worker, but Christian got the best match out of him on this show. Of all the matches, I mean, Ezekiel Jackson wasn't with WWE for very long, but for the time that he was with WWE, I thought this was the best matchup that he ever had. If Ezekiel Jackson is given a good opponent, if he's given a good opponent to work with who can get the best out of him, he can have a pretty good matchup, and I thought Christian was that guy. And they were given almost 12 minutes. And I've talked about, here on the show, here on WrestleRant before, and in hashtag AskGSM, and someone pointed this out to me, were the ECW title matches on pay-per-views back in the day, like the Divas title matches, are what they are today. And they absolutely were. But the funny part about it was that ECW was reaching its end. It was just about to close around this time. I mean, I think it closed like 2-3 weeks later. This was actually the final pay-per-view that was represented by the ECW brand. And they didn't give these guys 5, 6, 7 minutes. They gave them 12 minutes. So I thought that was really cool. And I thought it was a really good matchup. Ezekiel Jackson had a very good showing here. Granted, I still didn't think it was the best move to put the belt on Ezekiel Jackson as the final ECW champion. It did not do wonders for him. It probably would have been best to give it the happy ending that it deserved and have Christian go out as champion, but they really wanted to push Ezekiel Jackson, and I was an Ezekiel Jackson fan, and they gave the guy the Intercontinental Championship, but after he won the ECW title, they moved him over to SmackDown. He had maybe 1 or 2 squash matches, and he was left off WrestleMania because he had an injury, and he didn't come back for 5-6 months or something like that when he moved over to Raw. So it did not do wonders for him. But getting back to this matchup, I thought it was a great way to kick off the show. Very enjoyable matchup. Christian coming out victorious, still the ECW champion. So good match to kick off the show. Up next for the United States Championship. And what set up this matchup between The Miz and MVP was that we had a backstage segment with SmackDown GM at the time, Teddy Long, ECW GM at the time, Tiffany, backstage with Crime Time and the Great Khali. They're dancing and doing the pants on the ground dance, and Miz comes in and says, 5 years from now, no one will know what you guys are doing. Which is funny, because I watched this 5 years later, and I know exactly what they're doing. The pants on the ground dance, if anyone can recall, was that popular hip dance from the, I can't believe I just used the word hip, but it was that dance that was made popular on American Idol in early 2010. So I can't believe I remember that, and I can't believe they referenced that, and that Miz said 5 years from now, because I am watching it 5 years in the future. But that was funny, and that set up the match between Miz and MVP. Teddy Long said MVP is the #1 contender for the United States Championship, so why not hold that championship match tonight? And they did just that. So Miz defends the title against MVP. The match was good, but would it have killed them to announce the match ahead of time? I mean, it wasn't even like a filler match. The U.S. title was on the line, and the match was good. I mean, they would have better matches down the stretch. They didn't really give these guys enough time. They got about 7.5 minutes, but they definitely could have used more time than that to have a special match, and I think Miz and MVP complemented each other well in that they had two very different styles, and MVP was a threat to the U.S. Championship. And I thought it was a good match. Like I said, could have used more time. It was not a special match, and it would not have killed them to advertise this in advance to give it more meaning. But Miz comes out victorious with an inside cradle of all things. So MVP is protected in defeat. He attacks Miz afterwards with the playmaker after Miz is talking trash to MVP. So a good way of furthering the feud. I think they would have a rematch of the following month's Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, so it was a good way of furthering the feud. But yeah, good stuff here, nothing too special, but I thought it was a decent match. Up next for the WWE Championship, and this is really what I want to rant on, Sheamus defending the belt against Randy Orton. So from the moment that Sheamus won the belt, he was never booked to look like a strong champion. He was booked very strongly in his first few months on Raw when he was knocking out people left and right, retiring Jamie Noble, kicking Jerry Lawler in the face, knocking out John Cena, and technically, beating him clean for the WWE title. But from that point forward, the guy was booked very weak as WWE champion. He defended the title against John Cena in an episode of Raw that I was on, that I was in attendance for, that I was at on the final Raw of 2009 in Hartford, and defended the title via disqualification. So that's how he retained the belt that night. Moving on to his next challenger, Randy Orton. And I think the plan was for John Cena to be in the title match on this show, but I think he was suffering an injury at the time, even though he was in the Rumble match for like over 25 minutes. So I don't know what the point of that was, but Still, I think he had a Randy Orton was an interesting case because he was on the cusp of turning babyface. That was never more obvious than it was on this show. People were crazy for him in this matchup. I mean, technically he was still a heel at the time, so that kind of hindered the matchup for from a perspective in that people didn't really have any incentive to cheer for either guy, but they cheered for Randy Orton because he was so damn cool this time. And I think 2010 was like one of the better years in Randy Orton's career, in that, he held the WWE title for a few months at the end of the year, but, for that entire summer, the guy was so hot. And even I was thinking at the time, the guy's like the new Stone Cold Steve Austin. I mean, I laugh at that looking back on it now, but I mean, he was really hot in 2010, and it really all started with this pay-per-view. Like I said, Sheamus was not the strongest champion, and the match was good, but it was boring. It was very boring for most of the matchup. And it's funny to me, because both Orton and Sheamus are very good athletes. They both had great matches over the course of their respective careers. But Sheamus and Orton have never really had the greatest of matches when they're working together. Like, I know they had that good match. They had a pretty good matchup inside the cell at the 2010 Hell in a Cell pay-per-view later on this year. Later on in, 2010. But aside from that, I didn't enjoy their 2011 matches. Their match in 2012, I didn't really care for all too much. Their 2013 matches, people shit all over that the night after WrestleMania. And they even had a match early 2014. So every time these guys have worked together, I never really cared for most of their matches except for that one Hell in a Cell match. But, this wasn't a bad match. It was just mostly boring because Orton was a heel, in theory, and Sheamus was a heel. And even though the crowd was cheering for Orton and the interference from Legacy and them costing Orton the belt, I mean, this matchup was more about the tension within Legacy than it was about Sheamus and the belt. It was more about the tension building within Legacy. That was the primary focus of this matchup. So kind of suffered from that respect. In that respect, of the match was more about that than it was a championship. But it was what it was. It was kind of a miss on the show. But Sheamus interferes, or the Legacy interferes after Cody Rhodes attacks Sheamus at ringside. The referee waits 10 minutes to call for the bell after Randy Orton is already going for the cover. So Cody Rhodes cost Randy Orton the WWE Championship. Ted DiBiase comes out, attempts to cool things down between the two. Randy Orton attacks him as well. So beating up on both of his Legacy stablemates, and that would eventually, like I said, build to the split of the stable in a few more months. And Sheamus, I mean, he would attack Randy Orton after the match, and after hitting a bro kick on Randy Orton, I mean, I guess that's one way of making him not look like an afterthought, but this match should not have happened. I mean, they might as well have just gone with Sheamus and Cena, even though Orton and Sheamus was fresh, but Orton was still like a heel at the time, even though he was getting cheered. It was just very confusing from all fronts. I mean, Sheamus was not booked very strongly for his entire WWE title run, so that was that. And up next, we would have the Divas title match, or the women's title match, excuse me, with Michelle McCool retaining or defending against Mickie James. And this was another bullshit storyline. I never really enjoyed this. No one really did. I thought it was really disrespectful. I mean, I know it's what a heel, that's what their job is, but it was a lot more beyond that. It was more about the company trying to humiliate Mickie James for thinking that she had a weight problem and, making that the primary focus of this feud, except for making it a feud between two great wrestlers. And I mean, a lot of people give Michelle McCool shit for her marrying Undertaker, and that's the reason why she was pushed. But I thought she was a very good worker. I didn't think she had the best character. Her mic skills were not atrocious, but her voice was so annoying in that you just couldn't stand her for 2 seconds whenever she cut a promo. And that's what made her so unbearable as a character back during the days of Late Cool. But I didn't think she was a bad worker, and I think she and Mickie could have had some good matches. Like, they had a good match at the TLC pay-per-view in 2009, the prior month. And on this show, it was more about having the belt change hands than it was about the match itself. And I think Mickie James had a health issue or something. I think she had a hernia or something, a staph infection. She had some kind of injury that would sideline her for a while, because she won the belt here in about 20 seconds after taking out Michelle McCool with a quick DDT, won the belt. It was like a fitting conclusion to the story, her, overcoming the bullies and the rest of the Divas locker room coming out and taking out Michelle McCool and Layla with a cake and, giving their comeuppance. And, there was a cool moment, but no more than 2 to 3 weeks later, Michelle McCool win back that women's championship by beating Mickie James in a handicap match or something on an episode of SmackDown. Because like I said, I think she was injured, so they had to get the belt back off of her. So why bother giving her the belt in the first place? But they probably just wanted to give Mickie James her moment. So it was a cool moment for what it was. And like I said, they could have had a really good matchup, but they opted to go the way of just giving her the belt quickly, which I was fine with, because it made for a really cool moment and her winning the belt and giving LayCool their comeuppance. So it was what it was, but it was a nice moment, though. Up next for the World Heavyweight Championship, The Undertaker defending against Rey Mysterio. And like I said, one of the more underrated matches from this show, one of the more underrated matches from 2010. I thought this was a great match. Could have used more time, only went 11 minutes. It could have used, maybe 15 minutes. And early on, it was not the most exciting match, but it was very hard-hitting. Very, very exciting. A lot of near falls, a lot of two timing finishers with Rey Mysterio hitting the 619 twice, which I don't think it had been done ever at that point in time. So I thought that was really, really cool. And going for the West Coast pop and jumping up in the air, dropping the dime, whatever you want to call it, or whatever it is called. And going for that Undertaker cut him with the last ride, hit him with it for the clean pinfall. So I thought that was an awesome finish. And Undertaker was obviously going to drop the belt the following month to Chris Jericho, so Rey Mysterio, there was no point in giving him the championship. But they told a really good story here, because I think I talked about it more in my 08 review, in that Edge and Rey Mysterio had not feuded, or at least not had many matches together before that point. And same thing with The Undertaker and Rey Mysterio, aside from that one match in the Christmas episode of SmackDown in 09, I think they might have had one match in 03 or 02 or 03. But aside from that, Undertaker and Rey Mysterio would not have many matches together, so that's what made that match very, very special. It felt fresh. It was very, very good. Both guys are great. And I think one kick that Rey Mysterio landed on Undertaker actually broke his nose or made it bleed or whatever, because Undertaker was a bloody mess for the second portion of this matchup. So it really added something. I think it wasn't like it was a brawl or a blood feud or anything one of the other matches could have used, but, it was a really, really cool moment, Undertaker bleeding, and it really added something to the matchup, I think. So I thought the matchup from a wrestling standpoint, I thought was great, and you knew Undertaker was coming out victorious, but they were trying to tell the narrative that Rey Mysterio had not been world champion in nearly 6 years. He was trying to win back the belt, and which he would later that year at the Fatal 4-Way pay-per-view, one of the worst pay-per-view concepts WWE ever did. But I digress. I thought this matchup was great. I think it's very, very underrated. And like I said, Undertaker came out victorious, still the World Heavyweight Champion. So great match there. Really, really enjoyed that. So we get to the Rumble match itself, and I think this is one of the more underrated Rumbles as well, in that there were a lot of stories told, even more so than the 08 Rumble, which I also enjoyed if you listen to that review. And there were just so many different stories going on here. I think John Morrison, and especially Drew McIntyre, who had just won the Intercontinental Championship at the time, he was showcased very nicely. But more of the more notable appearances, more of the more notable showings in this matchup, CM Punk stole the freaking show in that when he came out at number 3, he quickly eliminated number 1 and 2, Dolph Ziggler and Evan Bourne. So CM Punk has the ring all to himself, and he cuts a promo, which was unprecedented, I think. I don't think anyone had ever cut a promo before. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I don't think anyone had ever cut a promo before during the Rumble matchup, and that's what I thought was so amazing, because they cut a Rumble. That was part of the course for CM Punk at this time. I remember sitting down with John, at John Knapp17 on Twitter. Go follow him now. Cheap plug. But we watched WrestleMania together together a couple of months later that year. And I was mentioning to him at that time, I remember this very clearly, in that he cut a promo during the Rumble matchup. He cut a promo during the Elimination Chamber matchup, which was also unprecedented, I think. And he would also cut a promo during his entrance before his match with Rey Mysterio at WrestleMania that year. So I thought it was really, really funny. But, yeah, I think CM Punk had a very strong showing in the Rumble. He could have lasted longer. They had him quickly eliminated by Triple H, and the Straight Edge Society and DX were kind of somewhat feuding at that point in time. They would not drop the belts to him. They would actually drop the belts to Sheamus. But I thought that was really, really awesome for CM Punk to cut the promo. He was so hilarious here, taking out 5 superstars. He took out Ziggler, took out Bourne, JTG, Beth Phoenix, and Zack Ryder before being taken out by Triple H. Like I said, could have lasted longer, but for what it was, I thought, CM Punk stole the show early on in the matchup. Triple H and Shawn Michaels. I thought Triple H was going to win this thing, and that's why I was. He was a very believable candidate to win this thing, since he not only had won a chamber, not only had he won the Royal Rumble before, and Matt Striker on commentary actually made mention of that the '02 Royal Rumble, which also took place from Atlanta, Georgia, he won that Rumble, so I thought they might repeat history here. There was a very strong rumor at the time that he would advance to WrestleMania to face Sheamus for the WWE title, in which they would have a match at WrestleMania, just not over the title. And so I thought that was really, really cool. And that Triple H, there was a huge possibility that he could walk out as the winner. So I believed in him as winning the Rumble. So when he was, going on for about 17 minutes, that he would be the one to win this matchup. So when he was ultimately eliminated by his tag team partner Shawn Michaels, and kind of shades from Survivor Series, and in that it built tension between those two. They would not end up feuding, obviously, but they would spell the end for DX for the time being before Shawn Michaels retired at WrestleMania 26. But it really told the story, and Shawn Michaels was like another star of this Rumble, and that he lasted a long time, and that people thought he would win the Rumble, that he was really, really obsessed with facing the Undertaker that year at WrestleMania for the World Heavyweight Championship, and of course he would find a way to have that matchup with interrupting the match between the Elimination Chamber match the following month and costing Undertaker the World Heavyweight title. But he was another star of this Rumble. He was so desperate, got a lot of eliminations, took out both members of Legacy, took out, I think, John Morrison, as well as Drew McIntyre and a couple of other people. So Michaels taking out his buddy Triple H. So he was another guy that you think, oh shit, could he win his 3rd Royal Rumble here? So he was another strong candidate to win. John Cena had a pretty good showing too. He was in there for a while. The ECW brand, I'm just looking at the contestants right now from the Royal Rumble. The ECW brand was completely humiliated in this Royal Rumble. They were not represented at all compared to their showings in the '07 Rumble and the '08 Rumble. I did not watch the '09 Rumble. They probably had more ECW participants, obviously, in that one than they did this one. But the 2010 Royal Rumble was not about ECW at all. And like I said before earlier on in the review, ECW was on the cusp of closing only a couple of weeks later, so I can't say I'm too surprised, but only 3 superstars from ECW were in the Royal Rumble, and they were all eliminated within a minute. So it did not make ECW look like the strongest brand, but I think that's pretty comical looking back on it now. R-Truth was weirdly showcased. This was around the point in time that we're trying to push him. He eliminated both Big Show and Mark Henry. I think he would he would be taken out by Kofi Kingston. And he would go on to WrestleMania to tag team with John Morrison for the tag team title. So obviously not a big push there, but they were trying to give him a nice rub by taking out 2 big giants in the Big Show and Mark Henry. But we got to the end of the matchup. It would come down to John Cena, Batista, Shawn Michaels, and the returning Edge, and Chris Jericho too. And this was one of my favorite moments as a wrestling fan, because like I said, this was the first pay-per-view I ever ordered. So, and I know, like I said before, there was a rumor that Edge would be coming back, not around this period in time. I was reading the dirt sheets, in early 2010, still not as religiously as I do now. But, going back to when he first got injured back in July of 2009, I remember having a conversation with John about that and saying, there's no better story to tell than Jericho winning the world title on the road to WrestleMania and Edge coming back as a babyface and feuding with his former tag team partner going to WrestleMania. There's no better story that could be told. So I thought that could be great. And he would return in this matchup at number 29, a huge shocker to a nice pop Matt Striker, not marking out on commentary like he did with Booker T the following year, which I'll get to in my 2011 Rumble review that would spell the end for his time on commentary. But the moment itself was so awesome, and that, like I said before, I watched this pay-per-view at my aunt's house, and my 8-year-old cousin, who I think was 8 years old at the time, and my other cousin was maybe 4 or 5. They had just gone to bed because obviously this pay-per-view's run long. It was like 10:30 or something like that. They had just gone to bed. Edge comes out. I'm marking the hell out. I'm going crazy when I hear that. You think you know me. I am going crazy. One of my first and one of my biggest mark out moments as a fan. Still to this day, 5 years later, and I still get chills watching that moment on YouTube, and especially on the network when I was watching this pay-per-view. And it made for an amazing moment. And the Edge comes out. He lays waste to everybody. He throws out Jericho. And like I said, they would build to a matchup at WrestleMania. So that was awesome. But the moment itself, I'm trying to keep quiet because, like I said, my cousins had just gone to bed. And I'm like yelling into a pillow because I'm going crazy. The Edge is back. And Shawn Michaels would get eliminated. He's taking a referees left and right. He shoved the referee at ringside. He would super kick. Deliver a sweet chin music to Charles Robinson in the ring, a great visual. And Charles Robinson selling that super kick like a beast, and just selling that desperation that he really wanted to walk out of this thing as the 2010 Royal Rumble winner. That there was no other way that he could go on to WrestleMania to face the Undertaker and get that one more matchup, because that was what he was so obsessed with at that time since the Slammy Awards. So the facial expressions, the desperation from Shawn Michaels, I thought was amazing. One of the highlights of this Rumble. And then Batista would get tossed out by John Cena, Matt Striker, or maybe it was Michael Cole, saying that it was payback from 5 years ago in 2005. And that, because remember, it was in that Rumble that Batista eliminated John Cena to win that year's Royal Rumble. So Batista gets thrown out by John Cena, Edge setting up the spear, and John Cena would kick him in the stomach. I'm like, no, don't eliminate Edge. I was getting so pissed. And then Edge would reverse it, toss over Cena. I continue to mark out like crazy. Edge returning from injury to win the 2010 Royal Rumble. So a great moment with Edge winning and returning. I thought it was awesome. And, like I said, made for a really, really cool moment with, him going on to WrestleMania to face his former tag team partner, Chris Jericho, who would go on to win the World Heavyweight Championship at the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view. So I thought this Rumble was great. There were a lot of cool stories. There was a little brief altercation between MVP and The Miz, and MVP eliminating himself to take out The Miz, shades of the 04 Rumble with Foley and Orton. So aside from ECW being buried in this Rumble, I thought this was a great Rumble. Strong showings from Shawn Michaels, CM Punk, Batista, John Cena, Edge, Triple H, everybody having a really good Rumble here. Even, some brief showcases from Kofi Kingston and R-Truth too. I thought this was one of the better Rumbles actually that I've watched. And like I said, maybe it's because it was the first pay-per-view I ever purchased and I had fond memories of it, but even in retrospect, comparing it to the past Rumbles that I've watched, I don't know if it's the best one that I've watched, but it was definitely more underrated because a lot of people don't give this matchup the credit it deserves. The pay-per-view on the whole I thought was really, really good. Like I said, brought back memories of watching it in my aunt's house 5 years ago. It's crazy to think it's been that long. But the pay-per-view itself I thought was really good. Obviously not a perfect pay-per-view. The WWE title match could have been better. I thought it was pretty boring. The result was, pretty lackluster with Sheamus retaining via disqualification. But it did plant the seed for the legacy split going into WrestleMania. We got a new women's champion crowned. Undertaker, Rey Mysterio having a great match. Miz and MVP having a decent match. And I enjoyed the opener between Christian and Ezekiel Jackson for the ECW title as well. And I made my thoughts known on the Rumble match. I thought that was great. Very underrated. Definitely go back and watch that Royal Rumble. I thought that Rumble was awesome. Especially with CM Punk early on, and Michaels down the stretch, and the return of Edge. Everything that went down in that Rumble I thought was very, very cool. So I give the show 2 thumbs up. I thought it was a very, very good show. One of the more underrated Rumbles. Like I said, maybe I'm biased because it was one of the first pay-per-views I ever purchased, but it was nice to take a stroll down memory lane, so to speak, so hopefully you do too by going back on the network and watching this before the 2015 Royal Rumble tonight, as they put out this video. But, like I said earlier on, I will be wrapping up my Rumble reviews this upcoming Tuesday with my thoughts on the 2011 installment of the Royal Rumble before we move on to my reviews of every single WrestleMania. It's a very difficult task. I've already reviewed the WrestleMania 17, WrestleMania 19, 20, and 21 from last year. If you want to go back here on the channel and check it out in my WrestleRant video series. But this year, I'm talking about every WrestleMania that I did not review last year. Like I said, it's going to be a very hard task, but I look forward to doing it on the road to WrestleMania. So once again, guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. All support is greatly appreciated. I'll catch you guys on Tuesday with my review of the 2011 Royal Rumble.